And we are back with another outstanding episode of Square Table Degenerates. Today we welcome to the show Libertarian Vice Presidential Candidate Dr. Mike ter Maat. How are you today, sir?
Good to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with your audience.
Heck yeah, man. It's I just got in the house like 45 seconds ago, like I was telling you. Oh shit, I gotta make I'm an idiot. Hold on. I gotta mute myself because I'm silly. Yeah, like I said, just got back from Scouts. Nice day out, man. It's hot. Where are you calling from today, Mike? Where do you live?
I live in Virginia, in the eastern part of Virginia, about an hour and a half east of Richmond.
Okay. So how far are you from the ocean?
Pretty far. I'm on the west side of the Chesapeake, so 40 minutes from the Chesapeake.
Okay. What made you decide? Because you've been all over, right? Where did I saw you born in Portland, and where did you grow up?
I grew up outside of Chicago, a little bit of time in Indianapolis, but I grew up mostly outside of Chicago. Went to school in New York and then in Washington, D.C. So I've lived in New York for quite a while, lived in Washington for quite a while, lived in Virginia for quite a while, and spent almost 20 years in South Florida. I was a cop for 11 and a half years in South Florida until just a couple of years ago.
Okay. Well, what the retiring in Virginia thing? What caused you? Was it just being close-ish to the Beltway kind of thing, or what?
I'm a couple hours from Washington, D.C., so no, thankfully not close-ish to the Beltway. I had built this place a long time ago and never had the opportunity to live in it. When I was working in Washington, I built this place for the purposes of retirement, albeit many years hence. So it's a joy to finally be in it. We're out in the middle of nowhere, but that feels good.
Okay. So let's go way back to the big. Sorry, I'm eating a Twinkie, man. I'll run. I should. When I was emailing your rep, I should have told her 8:30 was a better idea, because that would have been more excited, more ready to go. So excuse me for eating the Twinkie, but let's go back to way back in the beginning. You said Chicago, so that was what you grew up in. What was it in Chicago, in Indiana? What was the suburb name?
Well, when I was in Indiana, I lived in Indianapolis, but just for a couple of years when I was very, very young. I grew up in Des Plaines, Mount Prospect, Arlington Heights, went to high school in Arlington Heights. These are northwest suburbs of Chicago.
Okay.
So, grew up a Cubs, Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks fan.
Okay. When I was younger, from 82 to 87, we lived in a place called Carpentersville, and I want to say that's like close to Arlington-ish. I remember Arlington. It's been a minute since I've looked at it.
It's a hike.
Yeah, I guess it's been a minute since I looked at the King County map, but that's kind of right out of the same area. So we got some things in common there. But what was your youth growing up? Were you watching whatever the 60s and 70s equivalent was of the McLaughlin group? Were you plotting different stuff? Were you a political junkie nerd from the time you was young?
Well, the McLaughlin group was a little bit later. That's 80s, 90s stuff. But I suppose I grew up like most kids in the 60s, 70s, as television was just developing, and of course, in the days before the internet, television was just developing. And so we started out with only, the networks and then a couple of local stations. And so you didn't have a tremendous amount of choice like you did starting in the 1980s. But it was a different time. It was a time when programming was not so sliced and diced to meet certain segments of the audience. It was fairly generic because it was for everybody, and therefore it was sort of watered down. And this is, I think, why a lot of people look at it and call it sort of either wholesome or dopey, depending on your angle. But quality of television wise, it was actually at a nice level. It just wasn't edgy, leading edge, culturally breaking sort of material.
Well, back then too, I wasn't around in the 60s, obviously, but I was, some of the 70s, and I remember them people talking about it, obviously, but they reported news for fact, not for entertainment. Like they would just report the news and you decided what you liked. Maybe during
well, that's true. Although there's only certain access to the news that you can get working with your government, even in those days. And I think it was a more trusting time. I think that we look back and realize that we should not have been so trusting. I think it's probably the case that we should not have been trusting our government all the way back to 1789. But in the 70s and 80s, certainly we were not so skeptical of what the government was feeding us. And so, yeah, the media was not trying to put a spin on it, but I would argue that the media was even more subject to the spin that the government was putting on things than the media is even today. The media is intentionally feeding you one angle or another for entertainment purposes. And in those days, the media was feeding you the spin that the government gave you in certain measure by mistake, because they didn't know any better. And of course, there were shills for the government and the media even back then. But a lot of it was just dopey, covering your eyes kind of thing.
What pissed me off, Mike, about the media recently was when Trump got shot by that guy, right? The CNN for it was 5 hours, I think, reported, he's recovering from an injury in a fall. Like, you got to be a fucking moron to hear that the bullets in that thing and not know that's a gunshot. So that was 100% intentional on their part to mislead like that. Like,
that may well be. They corrected in due course. But you're right. A lot of people are willfully ignorant for certain periods of time, more or less, depending on your angle. They have, the facts of that particular matter are rather inescapable to a certain extent by now. Of course, We still don't know what went wrong, right? We don't know what broke down in terms of communication among the agencies. There definitely seems to be a certain unwillingness to be completely forthcoming at this point from the Secret Service. A part of that I appreciate, I understand. Until the investigation is complete, you're a little bit leery about revealing certain facts and then having to eat your words, 5 days later when you figure out, something was actually not what you thought it was. So I understand a little bit of caution, but because they have not done a very good job of being as transparent as they could be, even in terms of how the investigation is going, they've opened themselves up to a little bit of criticism and offered room for speculation on matters that I don't think are going to bear fruit.
Oh, for sure. Now, what was your first political memory growing up? Like, you're probably a little young to remember Kennedy, or Kennedy being shot, but like growing up, was your parents involved, or were you like?
Well, I remember 1968. I can remember my parents being upset about Martin Luther King being assassinated. And I remember similarly, it was all a blur, of course, when Robert Kennedy was assassinated, it was a big deal. Both of these were, very, very big deals. My parents were very upset. I was only 7 years old, not even, or just turned 7. So I wasn't politically aware, but it affects you when you're a little kid and your parents are upset about something. All of a sudden it makes you wonder, why would your parents be upset about something bad that happened to someone that they don't know? Right. And that's a complicated thing for a kid. And it makes an impression on you. Holy cow. There are people out there that my family doesn't even know, but there's something about them that is sufficiently important that my parents would be upset when something bad happened to these people. That's a weird thing in the grand scheme of things. And so it did make an impression on me. The other thing I remember, and this will make you laugh, I can remember when Richard Nixon, when it was being revealed in pieces that this guy was, let's say, shady, right? In bits and, we eventually all of us came to realize that he had been committing felonies and certainly fostering and directing and covering up felonies, which were felonies themselves. But at the time, this is being dribbled out. And I was I suppose 13 and not even 13. And then I was 13 at the time. Now consider, not only was I only 13, but for most of my 13 years, I had spent that in the 1960s. You know, we hadn't had, obviously we hadn't had Watergate before. We hadn't gone through this before. And so the whole idea that the president of the United States would be a felon, I was totally in denial. Impossible, right? It can't be. It just can't be. And I was kicking and screaming into belief over this thing. And that makes an impression upon you. Not only does it wake you up, obviously, it woke up all of America and perhaps parts of the world that had believed that it was relatively impossible for something like that to happen. But it's almost like a double impression. It's almost like a backlash when you are so young and you were so trusting, and to have that removed, it's almost like double, you know, it's the effect. It makes you skeptical. You're pissed. You're hurt. I think it's hurt, you know, that you feel for the rest of your life. You know, you're just a little bit angry. It's like if you had believed in Santa Claus until you were 13. Imagine if you didn't find out until you were 13, you'd be a little bit pissed off. And so that's kind of the feeling. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. My earliest political memories, man, I remember, I'm a little younger than you, not too much younger, but 1984, I remember Reagan. I remember that map, just looking at the map, it was just so red. Like everything was, you know, like Monday only won that one little state and District of Columbia. And after that, and I was, I looked at your history, it says you like a Republican up till 2010 or so. It's probably about the same, I would say. I really got involved in the Republicans back in the day. I really liked Bob Dole, 96. I was a big McCain guy, Bush, you know, going into there and
I remember, yeah.
McCain again. But then, you know, probably about the same time, 2010, 2012, Gary Johnson, that whole era. That was the, you know, probably the start of my libertarian jaunt and bring us out here. But,
well, good for you. I was really apolitical for the first decade of this century. You're right. I didn't register with the Republican Party until 2011 or 2010, approximately, something like that. And I had considered myself a Republican. I even, you know, I worked full time in the 92 campaign and helped out a little bit. 96, I helped out the gubernatorial campaign for W in 98, which is a weird thing. And then I wasn't involved in politics after that. But it's a weird transition. You know, leaving a political party is a funny thing. It really does. You know how people say the party left you, you didn't leave the party. That is how it feels. That's how it feels, because you don't feel like you're changing all that. You know, you're the same person you always were, right? Mm-hmm. But it feels like, you know, all of a sudden the Republican Party, instead of caring about things like free markets and free trade and fiscal conservatism and lower taxes and deregulation and pro-growth and leaving your ass alone, right? All of that. Instead, they're worried about like who's going to marry who. It's like, that's weird. Like, why do I care about that?
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't even remember being pissed off about the culture wars. I remember being more confused. Like, never mind how I feel about certain things. Why is this an issue? Why are we having this discussion? Why is this important in a public policy sense? It was confusing to me.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why I mean, there's parts of both parties that in theory sound good. I mean, most political ethos, not most, a lot do sound good in theory.
If they would adhere to some principles.
Right. And then, but people fail to take into account stuff like people want to own things. That's why communism does work. Like Frank Zappa said, you know, people are lazy. That communism also doesn't take into account that. I mean, it's great if everybody's getting paid the same, but you get paid the same to work. You know, somebody else is going to work a little bit harder. Then people learn how to game the system, and that's how that system ends up going flat.
You think? No, you're exactly right. And, you know, I think it is true that although, I thought I'd join the Republican Party for some reasons that made sense, and that party went in kind of a weird direction. I would say the same thing about the Democratic Party. I have a lot of friends who are Democrats who joined the Democratic Party a long time ago, believing in the principles of that party. Most of my family members, at least on one side, are Democrats, believing in the First Amendment, that the party would stand up for your civil liberties, and, you live your life the way that you want to. That's not really the Democratic Party anymore. The Democratic Party says you think the way we tell you to think, right? And we believe in government censorship. And we believe in regulating corporations to behave the way that we want them to behave, even in a social sense. We have the right to tell you to take a vaccine. We have the right to tell you when to shut down your business. We have the right to regulate your health care. And by the way, everything else. It's not a party that stands up for you do you. And I feel bad for Democrats the same way I feel bad for Republicans. These people that join these parties in good faith with some logic for some reason. And the parties just haven't kept their end of the bargain. The parties have gone in some really weird directions.
A lot of it's all about money, and a lot of it's just when you see what they do, when you see what they're about, and you see how they talk. In my opinion, Mike, you realize a lot of these people are just full of shit. They really are. They just totally full of shit. I'm not saying, I'm on YouTube. We talk. People say I'm full of shit, whatever. But it's just a whole different level of just being full of shit. I mean, think about, not to harp on the Democrats all the time, but I mean, think about what they did. I was just watching Bill Maher from the 21st. I was on vacation. We was down in the islands, me and my son. So I didn't watch it last Friday. And I watched it, or not last Friday, but the Friday before. And he had Pete Buttigieg on. Nice guy. Love Pete Buttigieg, fellow vet. And he was just talking about Biden's really good. He's, and this is like 2 days before this guy just says, I'm done, and quits it. So
right.
And then this other person, Kamala Harris comes out and, I'm the nominee now. And when we know he gets to vote, fuck out of here, dude. No way. I mean, if Kamala may even be a better candidate right now for the Democrats,
right.
She probably is. But fuck out of here with the way you do this. No, we have to vote. We have votes in this country, and they're just act like they don't care. It's stupid.
They are going to have a vote. You're just not going to be a part of it.
Literally, that's why I'm going to.
There will be an open convention, and they will all vote, and they can vote for whom they want to, but they better fall in line because the party leadership has already made this decision. To your point, no, It's quite funny.
Exactly, like Captain says. Yep. All right, now I looked at your education specifically. You had quite a bit of degrees. And for me, and me, judging me as an outsider, somebody who kind of only really knew about you in the past couple months or so, seemed to be all over the map a little bit. So bear with me on some of this. Now, it says you went to undergrad, you majored in aeronautical engineering. Now,
that was several hundred years ago, right after airplanes were invented.
Now, major in something like that, right after the Wright Flyer came out, and then they had the first closed cab plane, and then you got your license. Why didn't you go to like NASA or the Air Force or something? Did you have something that pulled you to go right back to school? Because it seemed like you'd maybe did something for a little bit and then went right back to school. What happened with that?
I went to business school. I was interested in economics and business. I took an economics minor when I was and a business minor when I was in college. And so I was interested in that. I would say before, my second or third year of school, I realized that I was, probably not going to just work as an engineer when I got out. I was really interested in the business environment, but went ahead and finished up the program and immediately did go to business school. And when I completed an MBA, I went to work for a couple of banks in and around New York and had a very good experience before eventually going back to graduate school and studying economics as opposed to business. So you're right. I did bounce around a little bit. As it turns out, lucky for me, the good news, maybe not completely coincidentally, that going from engineering school to economics school is relatively easy. All the equation systems work the same way. You just have to change the names of the variables. It's, really it's the same skill set. It's all analytic and numbers. And so it was fairly easy a transition for me academically, and had a good experience in grad school. I went to Washington, D.C. I went to the George Washington University for grad school. Took a master's degree and a doctoral program there, and had a good experience. It was very much a pro-market, free market type of environment, very much in the legacy of the Austrian school, Chicago school, and what we called at the time the Rational Expectations School, which was a very forward-thinking descendant of the Chicago school. So it put me in good stead for the rest of my career. It fit with my way of thinking and my philosophy, and had a good experience, had work experience that led to being able to spend a couple of years with the White House and then working in politics a little bit. Worked as an advocate in Washington for free markets in the financial services space for almost a decade. And then after that, had my own business in strategic consulting and educational programming for financial services executives. I taught economics at 3 different universities before going to the police academy as a second career when I was 49.
I was gonna ask you about the police stuff. Yeah, and I was doing the math. Yeah, you're older than I am. I'm 47. So you started.
I'm a lot older than you are. I was born in 61.
Ah, okay. So yeah, I'm sure what, 15 years or so. Okay.
Yeah, I turned 63 this year.
Okay. So you're right on the cusp. Okay.
So I have a full head of gray hair, and Joe Biden is more like my mom's age, which is a weird thing.
I'm going completely. Well, the whole thing about with Biden, people bring up a valid point, and I'm going to argue. And I know a lot of you Trump people, a lot of my viewers like Trump. It is what it is. I'm a white guy. A lot of you Trump people, go watch there was a National Black Journalist review today. Yep. And they're asking Donald Trump questions. One, he didn't answer any of the questions. That's Trump, what he does too. But he was fucking up, dude. He is, this is my opinion. The views and opinions of Joey Edibles do not necessarily reflect those of Mike. But listen, I understand. He's not cognitively there, in my opinion. His cognitiveness has went down. I think the Republicans, their whole plan was just to say Biden sucks, Biden sucks, Biden sucks. And now that Biden's not there, they do not know what
it is going to be harder to maintain that sort of line of argument when battling with Kamala. It does make the Donald look a little bit older. He's not the same guy that he used to be. I think that the good news, and maybe even the good news for the Republicans, I don't know. It depends on how it shakes out. But I think the good news for Americans is that it'll push the debate slightly substantively. Not as much as you and I might hope, right?
Right.
And there's still going to be a lot of name calling and a lot of silliness. And you saw that, to your point, out of Trump in front of the journalists convention. But I think it'll push it a little bit toward, well, she's too liberal and she's going to say that he's, a populist whose ideas don't make sense, and he's full of crap. He doesn't deliver. And he's going to say that she's a war hawk. She's done a crappy job in foreign policy and doesn't care about the border. And she'll say his border policies don't make sense. You get my point, is that they'll be mad at each other over some stuff that matters. I'm not real optimistic that conversation is going to be particularly educational or at a very high level, but it might be an inch higher than it otherwise would have been with just Joe Biden, who finds it hard to maintain that level of conversation.
Well, I mean, it's like this too. And why you should vote for Chase Oliver and Mike over here is because, I mean, we've already seen what 4 years of Biden is, and Kamala is just going to be four more years of Biden, but with sass. And we've already seen what 4 years of Trump is going to be. That's just 4 more years of Trump. And Trump picked J.D. Vance. God bless J.D. Vance. I'm probably 1 or 2 people away from knowing this guy. He grew up in Newcomerstown, right down the road here. I used to date a girl in Guernsey County, which is right around there. Probably, I know a couple people I was in the guard with. I got pictures with this guy. But I think the reason they picked J.D. Vance, I know a lot of people in the chat are going to hate this too, but I think that Trump wanted a guy who's not smarter than him. I really do. I think.
Well, he's a comfortable fit for the Donald, right? He thinks like him. He's obsequious. He'll kiss his butt, and he's not going to ruffle any feathers. He'll fall into line. He's comfortable. He's not going to make the Donald uncomfortable. He's going to make a lot of people around the United States uncomfortable, I predict. But Yeah, I agree with you. I think that we have seen 4 years of each one of these administrations. And I think it's sad. I would argue that as we were just talking about, I think that each one of these parties has left behind what their agenda used to be. And I think that most Americans would have to say, gee, neither one of these parties represents my values. And I say to Americans, whether you are a disaffected Republican or a disaffected Democrat, or if you're an independent who just could never warm up to either one of these joke shows, you should really be looking at the Libertarian Party, because our values align with yours. Our values are all about you live your life by your own standards. We're going to keep the culture war out of public policy and out of your face. We're going to stop the government from wasting all of your resources, from spending your money, from raising your taxes, from triggering inflation, from accumulating debt. And we're going to stop the government from prosecuting proxy wars all over the world and pressing us into hot wars all over the world. We're going to stop the government from taking your money forcibly, not optionally, taking your money and spreading it around the world in the form of foreign aid that we know just doesn't buy you a damn bit of good. And so, I've got a problem with our foreign policy, both in terms of ethics and in terms of efficacy. It just doesn't work. Our foreign policy has not made us safer. It has caused the world to be more dangerous, and it has cost the world quite literally millions of lives over the past couple of decades because of wars that the United States has prosecuted. And I think that those are things that you're just not going to hear from Republicans or Democrats. And it's a shame, because I think that is actually what aligns Americans' values.
All right, before we get into some of the questions from the audience, what was the PT test like at the police academy at 49 years of age?
I was lucky. Let me say I was lucky because I was healthy. It was the sort of thing that was in my wheelhouse naturally. I would encourage anyone who is considering it, do a lot of running before you end up there, but you'll be fine. The truth of the matter is, and this is neither here nor there, but as long as you asked, in my class of 33, I won the physical fitness award, and that's not age adjusted. Okay. Which probably tells you more about the lack of fitness of my classmates than it tells you anything about me. But I was lucky because I was healthy. I'd participated in athletics and sports when I was growing up and in college. And so I was in good shape. And I knew that because I was 49 in the police academy, it was going to be a challenge. And so I got ready I may have overshot, right? Winning the physical fitness award was probably shooting a little bit too high. But, I was lucky. But for others out there considering it, just do a lot of running in advance. You'll be fine.
It's basic getting in shape. Basically, he's basically telling all you yokels, just don't eat fast food for a couple months, quit smoking weed, and quit drinking the beer just for a couple months, and then get in shape and then go back to it. All right,
that sounds about right. I would say 6 months. And you also have to be prepared to have a lot of, 25-year-olds kick you, punch you, wrestle you, all these kinds of things. And, that's fine. That's no big deal. It's a little bit extra challenging when you're older, but it's nothing you can't deal with.
All right, we got a question. We had a bunch of questions from Captain. He's our lovely friend from Northern Ireland. He says, overregulation is destroying American business, especially in places like California. How will you fix that?
You got to rein it in a number of ways. And thank you for bringing it up, because it is so true. And he's right, especially in California. But the federal government's regulatory environment is really ruthless, and it's nationwide. Here's the first thing I would do is I would make as much federal regulation as possible, which is to say quite a bit, not all of it, but quite a bit. You can make it subject to the approval of individual state governors. In other words, you can create, in effect, de facto, through executive order, you can create a pathway for states in many cases to decide that they're not going to be subject to certain federal regulation if they take it upon themselves. And so you can imagine you're not looking for every state to take advantage of it. You're just looking for a couple of examples. You're looking for one. You're looking for one smart one out there. It's probably not going to be California. Sorry about that. But you're looking for one important state to become important by virtue of this decision to say we're going to chart our own future. My favorite example is, can you imagine if a governor were to stand up and say, we've come up with a way to license a new nuclear reactor in say 18 months. You know, if you demonstrate you've got the financial wherewithal to take care of business, to finish the project, take care of business if something goes wrong, right? Post a bond to keep the environment safe. If that's your concern as a state, I get that. We can get you to break ground in 18 months. Can you imagine the effect, the impact on our energy structure in the United States if we were to relaunch, reboot with nuclear as a part of the mix, which we know in the long run it has to be. We know that. Technologically speaking, nuclear is the future. Can you imagine if a state were able to get the federal government the hell out of the way and issue its own license and get somebody up and running? We understand that the technology has to come from Europe, right? We have basically let our nuclear reactor development technology wane.
It's
But
sad,
that's
right?
okay.
You think about it. You think about that. Isn't it crazy? We haven't built a nuclear reactor in what, 50 years, something like that? It's been a minute.
I don't know, a long time.
Wow.
A long, long time. We've decommissioned a lot of them, but we haven't broken ground. It's really a shame because it is the future. Windmills are not the future.
No.
Windmills are beautiful. I don't mean, you shouldn't build a windmill if that's what you feel like. I just don't think the government should pay you for it. If you want to build a hydroelectric plant and you knock yourself out, I just don't think the federal government should pay for it. Solar energy.
I agree too. Yeah, solar. It makes
Wonderful.
people
You
feel
do
good, but
you.
yeah.
Just don't want to subsidize it. But the future of American energy is in nuclear, full stop. And we know that a big reason why we haven't embraced it as much as we should is because of the regulatory regime at the federal level. If we can get some of that out of the way, have states compete with the best regulatory environment. Nuclear is just one example, but whether it's business or any other environment, that's what we want, is to get government out of the way. Now, there's a lot that you can do in terms of getting rid of the swamp as well. A lot of people tell you it's impossible, can't do it. It's not true. There are things that you can do which are a little bit tricky, not only in terms of budget cutting, but also in terms of moving seats around. It is true that a certain number of federal employees are hard to fire, but you can move seats around in order to reallocate resources and get people out from underneath the regulatory regime. There are things that you can do.
All right, I got to pick your brain because I noticed that you worked for the OMB, Office of Management and Budget. All right, I'm going to tie this into some modern events. So we're going to do some conspiracy theories here, people, because all you guys in the chat yapping about we never change anything. Maybe we'll get some cool moments here. Now, you're familiar with the OMB budget recommendations. I've seen a lot of this Project 2025 stuff, okay? Like all these memes and shit. I didn't read the thing.
Out of the Heritage Foundation, out of the think tank, the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah, we got to be real. It's just not going to happen. It's just not. I know the government, a guy who looks just like me works for the government. It's not going to happen. Regardless, a lot of the stuff's ripped right from the OMB recommendations. They get shot down. For those who don't know, every so often, I don't remember how it is, every year or two or so, the Office of Management and Budget comes up with recommendations to save the government money. Some of them are extreme, cutting veterans benefits, whatever, and most of them don't get through.
Every year, I used to do it. Yeah, every year.
Now, do you think, if we're conspiracy-minded, do you think this is all like a giant ruse by the GOP elites to like get rid of Trump in a classy manner? Because think about it. Think about it for a second. Now, I know a lot of you guys out here are going to act like Trump is a diabolical genius. If you think Trump is a diabolical genius, you maybe have to mute yourself for a little bit, plug ears. Okay, earmuffle for me, like you said, in the movie.
Look,
they're old school. Right, earmuffle for me if you think that. But they want to get rid of Trump because they got some of the stuff they want. They got their party justices and they got their little nitpicky things done. but they don't need this guy anymore. They don't want his idiotic family in there. So what they're going to do is they're forcing him out by putting out this totally buffoonish Project 2025 thing, putting Vance, who's additionally buffoonish, attached to it. So that way Trump just kind of sinks. Because you notice he's kind of distanced himself away. He's like, I don't want nothing to do with this. But the foreword of the fucking book and the project is written by your goddamn vice president. Don't act like you did say this shit. So
look, I understand Trump wanting to put some distance between him and Heritage. Some of those ideas are not all that politically popular, and so he doesn't want to be hooked to that. I get that. You're right. The Office of Management and Budget puts out the president's budget every year based on his proposals, based on a lot of ideas to save money, and they never go anywhere. Congress is not going. I don't think you have to be a conspiracy theorist. Just recognize the incentives that are in place. Congress is not going to vote to cut back somebody's benefits if someone's going to be pissed off and it's going to cost them some votes. Of course not. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to recognize that's just politics, blocking and tackling 101, right? That's not going to happen. In my view, the only way to get control over the budget in the long run is to go back to an environment that we had in the late 80s, early 90s, which is an overall cap on spending. And then you've got to ratchet that cap down. And I would make it include not only what we call discretionary spending, but also entitlement programs. And so you would relieve Congress of the burden of having to pick out which programs to cut, right? Because they can't. You can't, Congress is not going to vote against increases in Social Security or increases in Medicaid or increases in Medicaid.
Ever. If you're out there and you look at memes, you look at TV, you look at the internet, people, whatever, the government will never, you heard this from my lips right now, and I will guarantee this, will never reduce old people's benefits because old people are the only ones who vote because everybody else is jaded and they're overthinking it.
Yeah, and they vote their pocketbook and they're going to hate your guts. I get all that. So anyway, what is more politically viable, particularly if you threaten them with, shutting down the government and making everyone look stupid. And by the way, there is a crisis coming that we should talk about, but let's set that aside just for a moment. You can get more political viability out of the idea of an overall cap because it sounds fiscally responsible without having to go on the record as opposing any particular program. And then you freeze the cap in a nominal sense so that inflation makes it pinch over time. But you can also bring the cap down just as a numeric matter, bring the cap down over time. And then what you would do is create a haircut across all the programs. So, for example, discretionary spending would take a 5% cut. And so would Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, everybody would take their 5% cut. And there would be wailing and gnashing of teeth and screaming, but at least Congress wouldn't have to take a particular vote on a particular program. I do believe that the crisis coming will increase pressure, allowing Congress to make that leap. And what I'm referring to is that the federal government of the United States is going to reach a financial collapse before the middle of the century. It's on a collision course with arithmetic, right? It's not that sophisticated. You just can't, you can't keep taking on debt and paying interest and think that it's not going to pinch on people eventually. Eventually, people are not going to be willing to keep paying more and more taxes and getting less back for it because it's all going to interest and debt payments. There will be a crisis. I believe that it'll be triggered by perhaps a downgrading of the debt, causing the debt to be more expensive in terms of the interest rates the United States government has to pay. It could be triggered by a major war that would cause a great deal of expenditure. And there are various other things. The government obviously behaved like one great big moron through the COVID regime, and that cost tremendous amounts of tax revenue. And that's the kind of thing that, it wasn't the COVID that cost the tax revenue. It was the government shutting down businesses. And you could imagine the government doing something similarly stupid in the future if given the opportunity to do so. So there are any number of triggers. But even if none of those triggers take place, just the passage of time and the accumulation of debt will eventually drive the federal government under. And I do believe that as we approach that, optimistically speaking, and I don't have a lot of reason to be optimistic here, but optimistically speaking, as it gets closer, you might see pressure on the legislature to adopt an overall cap on spending, but we'll see. It's completely possible that they won't, and it literally will reach a financial collapse.
Well, it's weird with the collapse stuff because, money is just a concept. It really is. I mean, we like to act like it's not a concept, but money is just a concept. There's no gold standard. There's no rhyme or reason. We just print out money, and we have the big bullets and the big guns. So our money is just God, basically. And even if, with the collapse.
Well, you can create as much money as you want, but it's not going to change the fact that there are real resources at stake, and the government owes those resources to people, most of whom are domestic, but a huge proportion are outside the United States.
Big random circle jerk, forgive my French, of stuff that doesn't exist technically in the zeitgeist, if that makes sense. Like, say I have this phantom pillow, and you're like, Joe, you give me 5 phantom pillows. I'm like, here you go. But now you got to give me back 6. And we just keep doing this until it gets into trillions and quadrillions of phantom pillows. But at the end of the day,
yes, but inflation is eventually going to drive up interest rates, and they just won't be able to make the payments. Whether we recognize the underlying resource problem or not, eventually they just, the math just won't work.
Well, isn't that
bankruptcy is a real thing? Companies really do go bankrupt.
Oh, no, for sure. I'm not good at that. But the military-industrial complex does 2 things. One, it artificially props up the economy, creating all these random jobs that with the constant cycle of wars keeps going. But it also keeps the income, the money from going whatever. We can just be like, all right, we're going to make a little adjustment here for American purposes. And people are like, oh, you can't do that. Well, what are you going to do? We got F-35s and napalm. You know what I mean? So,
you can circulate the money as fast as you want. You're right about that. And you can make GDP look good by virtue of a lot of government jobs. But in the long run, the truth is that military spending does not contribute to future economic growth. It is a loss. It doesn't do anything productive. And so in the long run, it will be a contributing factor to a loss in income, and therefore a loss in tax revenue. And eventually it'll be a major contributing factor to the government going under. Eventually.
We'll see. All right. Why do all these random states feel intent on keeping little parties off the ballot? I don't want to call little parties insulting. Minor parties off the ballot. Like the highest,
because they hate us, and they are Republicans and they are Democrats.
And research.
If you were a Republican or a Democrat, you might do it too.
I look back and I was thinking oh wow, back in the 80s and back when Murrow and Ron Paul was doing it, they must have scored 4, 5, 6, 7% now. It was 0.5% back then. The highest Libertarians ever got was 2016, 3.28%. And in 2020, last election was 1.1%. Are they just that insecure that 1 or 2 or 3% nickage on the backside is going to be that much of a threat to them? How do we,
I love the way you asked the question, because I'm not sure, but I think the only answer is apparently. Apparently. Now, in defense of Democrats and Republicans being stupid, in their defense, if I can stand up for my American brethren, the morons in the Democratic and Republican Party, if I can stand up for them just for a moment, the Chase Oliver, Mike ter Maat Libertarian Party presidential ticket is currently polling at 2, 3, and even 4% in some places. We just got a Bloomberg poll that says we're at 4% in Pennsylvania, and in, I think, 2 other states. I've already gotten them all confused, and 3% in a bunch more. So this should, at this point, actually cause fear and consternation for Democrats and Republicans. I don't have data on from which party we're drawing more, right? I cannot tell you, are we pulling more from Democrats or Republicans? In the past, I think most people thought that we would draw more from Republicans. I'm not really convinced that that's true anymore. It might be, but I don't have data that backs that up. And so, it may well be that a Republican or a Democrat could say, gee, depending on how that goes, maybe it's in our interest for libertarians to pull more. I don't think that they can back up their concern in that sense.
Now, it's it's crazy with the libertarian stuff, because it's like, you're running for Congress. What compels you to even run as a libertarian? I mean, if you look at the numbers, I mean, we like to be pie in the sky. We like to dream. We like to think that, you could pop it. But I mean, if you look at the raw numbers, you run as a libertarian, instantly 95% of the people are going to be like, this guy is nothing. I'm not going to do it. What compelled you?
It's not the stepping stone to fame and fortune.
Yeah, I mean, just despite all these insurmountable odds and the fact that every single number of every poll ever says you're not going to do it, what decided you specifically to take this life of libertarianism? It sounds like I'm choosing. Why did you become this Christian who sacrificed lions? It sounds like that, but like at the end of the day, why did you choose that?
No, I get that. I totally get that. There are a couple of reasons. One is, of course, that it's important to get the message out and to use campaigning as a vehicle to do that. It turns out it is an effective vehicle. When I ran for Congress, we didn't get hardly any votes, but we passed out 100,000 contacts, right? Thousands and thousands of pieces of literature, dozens of thousands of electronic contacts, radio, stuff like that. You do get your message out. It's an environment in which, they're only going to vote for a Democrat in Broward County. I get that. But at least you get the message out, and, do you eventually move someone in the right direction? I hope so. Again, I don't have data to back me up on that, but it's worth the effort. You knock on a lot of doors, you meet a lot of nice people. The same thing for this, running for president and then running as, vice president as Chase Oliver's running mate. It's an opportunity to get the message out and to do so in the way that I personally feel is important. I believe that a focus, an emphasis on economic issues is absolutely critical. I'm a big believer in keeping the culture war out of your face and away from public policy, not letting the government tell you how to live your life. I think these are important issues, and so I feel good about doing that. Is it a bit of a pain in the neck personally? Yeah. There are joyous moments. It is fun if you have the right attitude. It's hard. It's expensive. There are downsides. I won't lie to you about that. And, you can get tired once in a while. And, if you have a bad attitude, you can even get tired of it. But by and large, as long as you keep in mind why you're doing it, that will see you through. And look, we all recognize, you're not doing this for yourself, right? You're doing this for others. And in some sense, you're not really even doing it for your party. You're doing it maybe for your philosophy. But the truth, and hopefully you bring members into the party, and maybe in the long run that helps bring money into the party, although it's tough slugging right now. But the truth is, you're doing it for your fellow Americans. You're doing it for other people. You're doing it for people who will never meet you, thank you, won't have the opportunity to give a rat's ass about you. But if you can make their lives a smidge better by passing along a philosophy and rubbing a Republican's nose in it, or, showing up a Democrat and making him or her take the philosophy seriously, if that helps someone somewhere someday, even for a moment, then it's worth it.
All right, I'm going to get very obscure here for a moment, but this is going to make sense once I finish the first sentence. All right. It's a common libertarian and even a general thing, just to say in general, we shouldn't be trusting the government. The government's out to get me, et cetera. You've heard that all the time. It's a lot of this whole party is built.
And it's often true.
Right. But number one, how come the over here says, good job, government, way to keep the Chinese out of my driveway. Nobody ever says that when things are going good. And what alternatives do we realistically have to a solid U.S. government? Like if we say the federal government collapses, who does it collapse to? There's no other nation with F-35s. I know this is a very big hoo-ha America moment, but, you know, at the end of the day, you know, we love to talk in absolutes as a party, as a nation, as people on the internet, because absolutes gets clickbaits, etc. But what really is to worry about the government? What other alternatives do people have? I mean, you look at Canada's government, look at Australia's government, Ireland, Europe, UK, etc. Everybody's government's in shambles. China, our government, as shitty as it is one of the best ones, in my opinion. What alternative? I mean, are we just kind of? I think
that says a lot more about how crappy the governments are in the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia than it says about how good the condition is of our federal government. Look, the truth is that our federal government is going in a very bad direction. Not only is it in a bad place, I would argue, taking, you know, a third of your resources and squandering them, but it's going in the wrong direction. It continues to take more of your resources and it continues to spend your resources in increasingly stupid ways. The other thing that needs to be said is that the projection of military power around the world, for the sake of protecting hegemony, for the sake of controlling others, not to keep us safe, but to control others, is not a plan that is working. Set ethics aside for a moment. Of all the weird things I'm going to say in your show tonight, let this be the weirdest. Forget your ethics just for a moment. Pretend like it doesn't matter. Pretend like you don't care about people, which is a weird, horrible thing to say. But just pretend, right? As a thought experiment. Ask your average American, name me a military intervention by the U.S. federal government that you think was a good idea, even though it cost us billions of dollars and thousands of lives, right? It achieved something in our long-term strategic interest. Americans would be absolutely befuddled, as would I. There is no good answer to that as a practical matter. And by the way, in Iraq and Afghanistan, we are not talking about billions of dollars. We're talking about trillions. And we're not talking about thousands of lives. We're talking about the loss of over 1 million lives. And I don't think most Americans are aware of that. And if they were, they would be more upset, because as impractical as these interventions have been, as abject failures as they have been, it is also true that you cannot forget your ethics, that these behaviors do not align with our values. These are decisions made by people who don't give a damn about your personal principles. And the way you know that is because they make decisions that you wouldn't make. You wouldn't decide to invade Iraq and Afghanistan and stay there for 20 years and kill hundreds of thousands of people. This is not something an average everyday American would do. And I saw in your comments, you're right, it has been since World War II that we have been doing stupid things that Americans do not believe are in our interest. And I'm very disappointed that this is not what you would hear from Republicans or Democrats.
Oh, sorry, you made me laugh. Without American military intervention,
I see that. That may be true. I'm not sure it's true. Consider the following. What if it's true? And I have given this all of 30 seconds of thought, so I could be off base here. But consider the following. What if it's true that the reason other nations have not sufficiently developed their movie industries is because they haven't had their own military interventions and wars? You know, we're hogging all of the war. And
right, you got to be you can't do occupying force shit if we're never an occupying force, right?
That's right. You know, maybe France would have a more robust war movie industry if we, in effect, told them, you people are going to have to pay your fair share. We're not going to subsidize NATO to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars anymore because it's not in our interest. Which
we
I
actually
believe
we actually had a question about NATO. I was going to ask later. What's your? I'll ask the original question. We'll go back to NATO. I'll ask the FBI question first because I heard that you say and I'll play a little devil's advocate back and forth with it because you were a cop, so it's interesting, because we need, in my opinion, we need some sort of federal law enforcement. But
I don't think we do.
You don't think we need a federal law enforcement? You think we do? Here, in my opinion, law enforcement, I think at least if we're going to have different ones at the state's level, I think the state's benefits and standards practices, they have to be standardized through all 50 states.
I don't know that they need to be standardized. I do think it helps to have an outside investigatory authority. I think the FBI does play a useful role sometimes in investigating other agencies, coming in from the outside. That's useful. I don't think it has to be with the federal government to do that. I think if the state of Nebraska, had a problem with their state police, and I'm not suggesting they do. I hope this isn't taken out of context. They could, there's no reason that they cannot invite an investigation from an authority from the state of Kansas. I don't think that, I think it's relatively absent creativity to say that has to be handled at the federal level. There are things at the federal level that strike me as inherently national. For example, the FBI argues, not always effectively, by the way. I think that they're full of crap when they say a lot of what I'm about to say, but they argue that they need an anti-espionage function, right? To the extent to which that's true, and we can argue about that later, but to the extent to which that is true, I don't think that has to reside in the FBI. That's not inherently a law enforcement function. That is something that can be handled inside of the Defense Department, which is inherently less political, by the way. One of the problems with the FBI is not just because it's inept, which it has proven itself to be over the last all of its lifetime, but that it finds it almost impossible to resist political temptation. And it seems almost inherent. And leaders have come and gone. You can't say, well, that was just Hoover, right? No matter who has been head of the FBI has been subject to politicization. At some level, you've got to say, maybe it's not the fault of the schmuck at the top. It is inherently, structurally subject to these forces, and we need to do something fundamentally different, not just keep replacing the agency director.
All right. Speaking of wasting money, this is a good segue into what is the Libertarian stance on DEI? Now, obviously, historically, certain people were marginalized. In my opinion, that time was many, 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 many moons ago. This is just me talking. I don't know what drew my opinion of this. Maybe it's just my years of living, but I think the time for certain set-asides and we got entire branches of government, or entire divisions of cabinets that are dedicated to DEI. I don't really get what these people do all day besides, throw an Asian American luncheon in April or whatever. But what is your personal take, and what is the official libertarian? Can't fucking talk.
I think most libertarians are where I am on this. I won't pretend to speak for the party lockstep, but I think that most of the party would agree with me that it's none of the government's business. That if you're a corporation and you want to hire people on the basis of encouraging diversity and encouraging equity, encouraging inclusion, or encouraging anything else you want to encourage, right? That's your business. You do you. It's your company. And if you want to hire for stupid reasons, I don't know whether DEI is a stupid reason or not. I don't care. If it's your business, you hire the way that you want to. And if you don't want to hire in alignment with DEI, that is your right to do so as well. But it should not be the government's business. it should not be the government's business to impose even on itself. The government should not be imposing on its own hires a DEI structure. Now, should we allow the government to discriminate on the basis of sex or race? Absolutely not. Or ethnicity, religion? No, absolutely. We should not tolerate a government behaving in a racially biased way, sexual identity, sexual orientation, or just sex way. We should not be putting up with our government behaving in a stupid way. But if you're a company, if you're an individual, you do you. You have the right to be as dumb as you want. And if it turns out that you're really smart, then that's terrific too.
All right. We got about 9 more minutes, guys. Then he's got some obligations. Why is our brother Chase? He randomly gets called shit like far left and other nitpicky bullshit things. He's really a solid guy, in my opinion. Clearly better than these other two guys, girls, whatever the fuck it is. Why do people just like hear one thing or hear a rumor and then it's like cha-ching, and then they instantly think this is a thing? Is it just an attention span thing, Mike? Do we ever get our attention spans back? I mean, are we headed for idiocracy? Is it real? I mean, is there any hope for this? I mean, it's against libertarianism to really, legislate shit. But I mean, this TikTok problem, this attention span thing, it's a real issue. It really is. I mean, what do we do about it?
It is an issue. I don't have a good answer, by the way. I think that it's natural for humans not to spend as many hours as would be required to make good decisions about a lot of things, politics included. And I would like to say you shouldn't have to. In a perfect world, you should be able to have people represent your interests so that they pay lots of attention to details so that you didn't have to, right? Most people have busy lives. They have jobs and families and speedboats or whatever it is you do with your time and your money. And you shouldn't have to spend a huge proportion of your brain worried about your government or worried about your government officials. Unfortunately, there are people who have taken power both in the federal government and other levels of government who have taken advantage of that concept for their own benefit and have manipulated us into giving up a great deal of our civil liberties. So it's a real shame. In answer to the political question about individuals, I can, for what it's worth, I've gotten to know Chase Oliver, for example. He's a very solid guy. He is not as, people would, you're right. There are people who call him left wing. It's just simply not true. That is not an accurate representation of where he is in his politics. He is a very libertarian guy. He's a very pro-peace, anti-war guy, extremely pro-peace, anti-war guy. I like that, to be honest. I come from the Republican side. He comes from a Democratic background, so we come from two different directions, but we see eye to eye on virtually everything. And so I think that it's one of those situations where, you hear that maybe there's something in his background that's different than yours, and so you become a little bit, skeptical, right? I'm sure that there are people that look at my background and say, oh, he used to be a Republican, he was a banker, he was a cop. And so, they're skeptical. Is he really going to want to hold police officers accountable? Well, yes, I spent enormous amounts of time talking about that and systems with which to do so. But, if all you did was look at the resume, you might be skeptical about that. I get that. It's natural. But that's one of the reasons why we need to talk it through.
With the internet, I mean, it's obviously in an hour show, we can't solve all problems. And we got to be real too. There's so many problems. There's so many layers to the problems, Mike. It's like an onion. You know what I mean? And a lot of it's just mindset. At the end of the day, if you could feed your family, you got a proud job to go home to. That's all people want. They just want to have a hard day's work. They want to have fulfilling work, make them feel like they accomplished something. They were better than something that was bigger than themselves as a big collective and just have a great America. That's what America was built on, man. We this online stuff. Everybody bickers about the most mundane shit, man. They really do. And when you talk to people in person, you look at them, you see who they are, you see how they act, you see that most everybody's in the same boat. We're just all trying to pay bills, get along. When I say most, yeah, there's rich people out there. We can deal with those guys when we get to them. But like the majority of us in the chat, watching replay, you, me, etc., we're just regular people doing our thing, trying to make the world a better place than we left it. And at the end of the day, if everybody's out here fighting, everybody's out here looking for quick fix answers, easy bullshit that nobody's ever going to deliver on, nothing's going to get done. So you got to concede some things. You got to concede that nothing's going to get fixed overnight. Problems need to be solved with a lot of patience, a lot of time. You know, we ask any of the people that are watching from Canada, from Australia, from Northern Ireland, etc. A lot of those guys would kill to be in America right now. And the majority of Africa would probably kill in America. And I guarantee you, once the Chinese quit getting fed bullshit, they would love to be here too. So at the end of the day, you just got to get along and learn how to just relax on people. People getting a name call. That's one thing I don't like about Trump, Mike. He just made everything so crass and just name calling and this. And it's there's no decorum anymore.
No, I don't like that either. It runs against the old school nature, doesn't it?
Oh, I hate it, right? Oh, it just drives me up a wall. Just basic getting along, just getting to know somebody. How you doing? Sit here, we'll smoke for a couple hours and just chat and have some fun, and we'll come up with a solution to it. Nobody wants to do it anymore. They will purposely sabotage this damn country to get across some political statement. We need to stop that. I mean, you would agree 100%. I
agree 100%. Indeed, I do believe that it is in our nature to lean into being a pluralistic society, a tolerant society. I think that's one of the things that separates us from other democracies around the world. I think that we're inherently proud of that, and we recognize that it is what makes America America. For better or for worse, yeah, we think it's for better, right? I think that that's where we want to go. I think that that's why I'm so optimistic about libertarianism with a lowercase L, right? Whether it's a libertarian party or not. But I think people naturally feel like they want to be able to work hard, benefit from the product of their work, as opposed to the government doing that. They want to live their life by their own standards and pursue happiness, however they define that. And Americans enjoy other people's success. And this is inherently and fundamentally different than many other societies. We are not as jealous a society as others. And people in the United States don't realize this. People in the United States believe that we are a jealous, racist, sexist society. I got news for you. Step outside of these borders and you'll see that in relative terms, we're light years ahead of the rest of this species. That's not to say that we don't have progress to be made, because we do. That is absolutely true. But the fact that we take joy in other people's success is everything that you need to know about how un-American socialism is. We are not a jealous society inherently, and we need to stop politicians from shoving this bullshit down our throats.
Amen, man. Amen. Just get along with your neighbor. And we joke a lot. We all have fun. And that's the beauty of, I'm not trying to sit here and act like I'm some kind of weak Jesus or some bullshit, but that's the beauty of our chats. I'm not going to sit here and block somebody because they said, oh, that guy said that this guy didn't. No, I'm not. Without discourse, you're not getting anything done. If you don't talk, if you don't listen to that person who's yelling at the top of his or her lungs everything you're against, and you just can't sit there and take it, you're not really an American. American's not about, well, I mean, I guess that's kind of counterintuitive because we do kind of go in there and take what we want. But like on an individual basis, being an American is about being able to negotiate, being able to get along, being able to better things.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And
I'm
before
glad
we go,
to hear that you feel that way. It certainly reflects where we are as a party, where we as a philosophy, and where we are as a campaign. I'm so glad to have spent this time with you. It's been a real joy. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. And Mike, before we go, in a couple of years, if Ohio gets the Democratic thing back for Libertarian governor, remember the name Joel Farrell, dude, because I want to run for governor because nobody else wants to do it. Nobody else jumps in that grenade. So just remember my name in a couple of years.
Count me in for an endorsement. I look forward to it.
Loves you. That's sir. Yes, sir. All right, so go check him out when you're going vote in November. And thanks, Mike, for coming out, brother. It's been an honor.
Thank you. It's good to
this.
be with you. I look forward to doing it again in the future.
Yes, sir. All right, we'll talk to you guys later. Take it easy now.
Take care.
All right, bye.